Mathmech always seemed to be disappointed throughout its life. Like me, from not having enough to be simply referred to as a deck to getting barely pushed outside the format by better alternatives. No one expected this deck to be good, but it did end up being the strongest of its original set, having been an OTK approach to be the best across the meta, and just basically beating out the other two fan favorite decks of Dragon Maid and Generator. But how did this deck grow into one of the most dominant decks in one of the Yu-Gi-Oh's most infamous Tier 0 formats recently? And why is it forever stuck on the ban list? Can it even compete after all of that? Well, what happened to Mathmech? TOS format, regarded as one of the most formidable formats of all time, had the set Mystic Fighters released inside of it, causing each of the decks in the set to contend with the setting of Sky Striker, Solomon Great, Orcust, and Thunder Dragon. For this video, we're going to be ignoring Dragon Maid and Generator. Obviously, if you want to know about those decks, you can watch all of Dyer's videos. She's still coping on Generator to this day. Or you can leave a like and also comment on which one you want to see next. Mathmech, which obviously is themed around, you guessed it, English literature, is a new archetype of Cybers monsters introduced to Mystic Fighters, and is made up mainly of level 4 monsters of various attributes, focusing mostly on its Synchro and Xyz plays. The two primary cards of this deck are the infamous Sigma as well as Nabla, which both have different ways to benefit the deck at the time of release, although this is without the two main cards of the deck's engine that we've known for today. We'll get to them soon. They also have two distinctly different sub-archetypes. Yugioh Mathmech, a set of fire synchro monsters that visually resemble Mathmech Sigma compared with its other fire Mathmech cards, and they're usually this deck's like end goals. Magma is a good enough turn 2 option to play under Nibiru, while also being a decent enough option for continuing or ending with it by itself. That being said, its targeted destruction effect requires you to be able to enter the battle phase already, as well as being able to target monsters your opponent controls that won't negate you. On the other spectrum of these cards is Final Sigma, which is an impressive tower monster, which is very common at this time. As long as it's in the extra monster zone, it's unaffected by card effects, plus it also doubles any damage it does in battle. Also, its floating effect is a direct upgrade over Magma's, as it adds any Mathmech card when destroyed by battle or card effect. Even at the time, Final Sigma was the centerpiece the deck attempted to go into as frequently as possible, using a pure Mathmech build to turbo him out as fast as possible, as we didn't have any useful generic material to support it yet, beyond sign-up mining. Now, Prime Mathmech, who are Earth Xyz monsters that visually resemble Nabla, combined with the main deck Earth Mathmech monsters, Multiplication and Division, are more extensions with cards like Alimbersion, where depending on the amount of material detached for its effect, you can search for a Mathmech monster, a generic level 4 monster, or a spell or trap. At the time, you would summon Alimbersion from Superfactorial to Sense Subtraction to have opponent's monsters attack, assisting in the deck's OTK line. Keep in mind that this was happening before access code was even really an option for most people, as well as Mathmech, so just beating over with Final Sigma became the deck's only real goal. At the same time, the Loplation was a very different look in its original release. But who doesn't know what this Xyz Trishula guy does at this point? Do you want me to explain it to you? Really? Alright then, sure. Loplation requires 3 materials to Xyz summon, which is already a problem at the time when most materials could be used for Final Sigma, but don't be concerned about that. For the cost of all its materials, you can attach them so you can destroy a monster, a back row, and a card in your opponent's hand. It can still be negated. At the time of release, the only options were a generic extension with the 5 level 4s and other decks, treating them like a pseudo spirit engine of today, but way worse, in a pure build, quote unquote, that can beat its meat constantly, but has a long way from here before it can defeat it. Even in this first wave, Mathmech would only have its 2 regional tops total before its first wave of support, and it was a decent start. Europeans be damned, this deck does do things without Cyber's generic good stuff, though it would have been nice at the time. What do you mean? Doesn't it still have the negate from Diameter? Diameter was not included in the initial fucking Rise of the Duelist was released on August 7th, 2020, and featured the first wave of support for Mathmech, Diameter, who helped push the deck well into a comfortable position of usable. Diameter, pretty much being a monster reborn, allows you to target a level 4 lower Cyberse in the grave and summon it back to your field when you normal summon it, giving you an easier way into Alimbersion or a level 8 Synchro for just normal summon. This opened up a lot of new plays for the deck. Aside from the generic extra deck garbage we all know and despise to this day, Access Code Talker, Nightmare Unicorn, it would still usually go for Final Sigma if you needed them. Along with Diameter at at this time. Parallel Exceed became a prominent card in the deck, which, if you have not read this card before, is very good. When you link summon a monster and this card's in your hand, summon them out, make it level 4, and then when he's summoned with this effect, just summon a second one from your deck and make it level 4, giving you an easy way into a generic link 3 or an easy rank 4 if you really need it. As the recently unbanned Distant Coder would know, Diameter gives the deck a perfect comeback plan, making this card a must-have to every build of the deck, eventually turning it into the Cyrus pile we know today. Having said that though, Mathmech would get exactly 0 tops throughout this wave of support. You remember, this is the same set that released Dogmatica alongside Albaz into the world. For better or for worse. Dogmatica had the overwhelming ability to send cards from your opponent's extra deck to the grave, which for a link climbing deck is pretty much suicide. If you wanted a better link climbing deck that could also synchro or exceed, why not just play Dragon Link at the time? It would safely link into all of its usual bosses at the time and use Boreal Savage to with little resistance during their turn. And then lastly, Mathmech could easily kill any deck going second unless El Shaddai Winda is on the field, at which point you're not accomplishing much during your turn. Alright. So what's really wrong with this deck right now? Well, the game is currently at the point where 1-card combos are starting to become a real thing, leaving 2-card lines to be a little bit slow and or clunky, leaving a lot of decks that came out during this time actually very bad. Mathmech also lacked a secure means to play out Nibiru. The Sigma banished it when it leaves the field, and the fire level 4s had not always been available to see if you didn't open them. If only we got a third wave of support to not fully fix the entire deck's problems, but also make their end goal like, I don't know, some type of like link pile, I guess. Do you get it? It's like a circle. It's time for the best set of all time. Power of the Elements. Released with support that would not only help every deck in the game ever, whether it was Crawler Soma, summoning 2 crawler monsters face up or face down to your field, Melfi Wally and Penny being the perfect engine, along with Sprite, one of its new decks that was released to be one of the most powerful things ever, right next to Tier Limit for no reason, but just Tier Limit being too powerful for its own good, in the deck of today, Mathmech, with its best card ever, Mathmech Circular. Mathmech Circular is the deck's hero. I think is one of a 1-card starter into any end board without the need of normal summon. If you activate Circular, you can send a Mathmech from the deck to the grave, then summon itself. And if you do summon a Mathmech while it's on your field, you can add Mathmech Spell or Trap from your deck to your hand. Also, the deck could go into anything on either turn, turning it into a very well-designed mid-range deck. If you played during this format, you notice that Mathmech rose from a rogue strategy to almost a tier 1 status thanks to its single card. We've now reached the point where I actually started getting into the game myself and played this exact strategy because holy shit is this deck so fun to actually play, and it was the best deck before I learned how to properly play with myself. Get your mind out of the gutter, this is math class. If you already did your combo without using Circular at all, sending Nabla with Circular into the grave let you do an attack OTK without actually needing to use Update Jammer, which was a pretty good line for the time. But more often than not, you would just send Sigma to special it out with its own effect, then add Super Factorial through Circular, being able to go into Alumbration. Basically, summoning Circular was the opening line for you to do whatever you wanted, whether it was grabbing material for to make Heat Soul turn 1 or to freely combo into Access Code Talker to instantly kill your opponent. Good thing is old habits die hard. The deck could do anything, and this lasted for a while. This deck was a force to be reckoned with. If it wasn't winning an event, it was at least finishing top 16 of that event with 4 different players, each with their own unique build. Some, in particular, being pure build, focusing on just trying to live a Tier Limit's turn while setting up your own field to kill it through everything it plays through it, except the Ishizu Shufflers. Ignis Mathmech, mixing an Adagnister to create an easy tower turn 1 and using the Mathmechs to OTK during the following turn. And Advent using the Adventure package to make a negate and bounce before you use the Mathmechs normally and make a much more interesting board, ending with an extra negate. During this time, we would eventually start moving into the pure build fully after the new Firewall support came into fruition. Administrated even in the new format with Kashira or Rise Heart around, it could be played through even a Macrocosmos if played correctly. Unfortunately, Konami, like every third best deck in this game since Dinosaur, would have to have it hit eventually, even if it wasn't required. June 5th, 2023's ban list did a lot of good for the format, including the removal of Cyberstein, Diabolus the Mind Hacker, and Brand Expulsion, which helped the game be a lot more tolerable at the time. There were, however, a few random hits that really confused people. Super Heavy Samurai Scarecrow, an essential card in the Super Heavy engine, allowing for true monster mash piles, had its main player banned a month after the deck was introduced to the meta. Lightning Storm, Sprite, Starter, and Runic Fountain had all been semi-limited, even though most players were unsure what these hits could actually do to these decks that involve them. And then there's Mathmech Circular, which, despite the massive changes it brought to players' vocabulary, deck building, as well as what Cybers might do, was finally hit to limited, indefinitely shaking up the entire deck. Gee, if super combo decks were like a problem, Konami, why didn't you hit fucking Rika Princess? You'll reap what you sow in your... So what did this ban list do to Mathmech? It went from a super big control deck to where Konami always wanted it to be, a OTK going second pile. It always could have done that, but it was more difficult now without Circular. Gone are the days where you could just open Circular and still threaten an Alimbertion, searching the next card, forcing your opponent to choose between letting Alimbertion resolve if you're missing Circular, or letting it resolve and saving for the Circular's effect itself. You're now always looking for Circular, and every player recognizes Alimbertion as the deck's own branded fusion. If it resolves, you just play infinitely. If not, let's just say you're more desperate for extenders now. So what do we do with Mathmech now? Let me go back to Toss for a moment. Obviously the four namesay decks of this time would eventually get hit by a ban list. Thunder Dragon had Colossus banned, its largest boss monster. Orcus had Harp Horror, its best extender, removed from the game entirely. Sky Striker had 4 of its different cards completely removed from the game. And Salamon Great also had Gazelle Encircled limited for years. Today the last two are practically back at full power completely, and usually are getting more support almost every other set, giving them a lot more interesting ways to like do stuff. Harp Horror could very safely come off the ban list whenever people wanted it to come back, and Colossus, let's not bring up Colossus actually. Mathmech could have Circular removed from the list like today. It's time for us to stop listening to Europeans. Free the circle. It fucks Joshua Schmidt. Was that aggressive?
I'm not Miller.